dying, Father. Is nothing left. Ever since I was a child, I had the feeling that something is missing me. I want to know why I'm here. Can any of us know that? Become yourself. Then God and the devil don't matter. I want to learn. I want to understand. Be careful. Can you find the force to enable these two quite opposite lives to live together in yourself? At any moment, the wolf can devour the lamb. And you must learn what it means to become responsible. This is an exact science. And that is why you are here.
The foreknown history to the unknown future. This is Red Ice Radio for the Seeker.
And know what.
One must strive to know.
Well, hello and welcome, folks, returning or new listeners. Doesn't matter, it's good to have you with us whenever or wherever you're listening from. My name is Henrik Palmgren from Sweden, and we have two websites that I think you should check out if you want to hear more. redicecreations.com and redicemembers.com. Richard C. Hoagland is a former Museum Space Science curator, a former NASA consultant, and was science advisor to Walter Cronkite and CBS News. In the early 1970s, Hoagland proposed to Carl Sagan, along with Eric Burgess, the placement of a message to mankind aboard Pioneer 10. Since then, he has been pioneering the pursuit of uncovering the hidden data of our solar system. He is the author of several books, probably most famous for his theories on the face on Mars. His website, enterprisemission.com, is updated regularly with analytical research into current anomalies on our planet and way beyond. Today, Richard is with us to discuss the trip he did to Chichen Itza in the Yucatan, where he did torsion measurement readings with the Accutron device at the Temple of Kukulkan on December 21st, 2012. In the first hour, Hoagland will set the stage and give us the details about the experience, consequent arrest, and other strangeness. All right, welcome back to Red Ice Radio, Richard. Good to talk with you again. How are you?
It's great to be back.
I know you've been busy. A lot of things have been going on since we last talked, of course. I think one place where we need to begin is around your trip to the pyramids down in Mexico and the whole torsion. I know that you were arrested as well. Take this from the top for us, Richard, so we can understand what happened to you here.
Well, I've been working on the torsion field hyperdimensional model of a new physics, which actually is a rediscovered physics, for about 8 or 9 years, ever since we made our first measurements of the Venus transit back at Coral Castle in 2004. And I was obviously beginning to empirically check the work that a lot of people had done vis-a-vis the Mayan calendar, the predictions of the so-called end of the world. And we have been able to, with the assistance of Enterprise Mission Associates and my Facebook friends and fans, of which there are legions, and I'm incredibly grateful to them, and to some private sponsorship, we've been able to go to some very interesting places, to ancient sacred sites all over the planet, Central America, Europe, etc., to measure the background torsion field changes that were progressing in the model toward 2012, as well as the local amplification of the field that I, basically had laid out that these ancient sites might, in fact, create. And what we were doing, sponsored people like NBC and, as I said, Enterprise Associates, is we went to Teotihuacan in Mexico, and to Tikal in Guatemala, and to Stonehenge and Silbury Hill and Avebury and some other places in England over the last few years. And we have measured in addition to background measurements here in the United States, we've been measuring the changes in this field with a device that I basically have adapted and digitized from my departed friend, Dr. Bruce De Palma, who first used it in the 1970s to measure this physics, except he didn't have any digital readouts. He didn't have laptop computers and apps and algorithms and, the off-the-shelf stuff we have now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what I've done is I've digitized the system so that you can basically take it anywhere. It runs on batteries. And you're looking at the background changes that are occasioned by time of day, where the moon is, where the sun is. I mean, this is all dependent, as we found out empirically, on celestial alignments, which, of course, is what the theory said it would be. And so we've been going from sacred site to sacred site measuring the changes in this field, because the torsion field is basically the old-fashioned classic ether that was supposedly abolished by the introduction of the theory of relativity by Einstein in the last century. Well, I can report that the ether is alive and well and doesn't know it's been abolished by anybody, and we have been measuring it in these various places and getting rather extraordinary readings which affirm again and again and again that the field strength and the changes in the field are dependent on celestial configurations, celestial alignments. In other words, we're looking, Henrik, at hyperdimensional astrology, nothing more, nothing less. So when the occasion presented itself, that was a long lead-in to answer your question. When the occasion presented itself to go to the Yucatan, to Chichen Itza, which is kind of like the Mayan center for all the ancient Mayan calendrical and ritual and memorial and ceremonial materials, Robin and I jumped at the chance. And thereby, as they used to say, hangs a tail, because it turned out that for a variety of reasons, which I had described at some length on Coast the other night, certain permits were not secured by the organizers of the trip on which I was invited, unbeknownst to me. So the night before we get to Chichen Itza on the ship, I mean, we're on a 100,000-ton cruise ship called the Carnival Triumph. Now, if that name rings a bell, it's because that's the same ship, identical, the same ship that's been stranded in the Gulf of Mexico over the last week, when we record this, and just got into port last night, again, as we record this, with 4,000 passengers and crew, without facilities, without anything. Something happened in the engine room, and I will speak to that later, because my measurements may, in fact, give a hint as to what could have happened with this cruise ship, which was, weeks after we had actually used her to go to and from the Yucatan. Well, anyway, we're on the ship the night before we get to Chichen Itza, which is December 18th. And we get a radiogram or a fax or a text or whatever they do on the high seas saying that under no circumstances will the authorities allow me to bring laptops, measuring equipment, the Accutron, backpacks, water, nothing into Chichen Itza.
Well, wait a minute, back up. Who sent this message?
This is from the authorities of Chichen Itza itself, the administration.
So the local government, basically.
The local, you can call it the local government. I'm not sure how it breaks down in terms of federal and local authority. I mean, we have measured other Mexican sites. I mentioned Teotihuacan, and we had no problems. So we were kind of thrown into a bit of a panic, so we called Jaime Musan. Now, you, of course, have had Jaime on the show, right?
Actually, I have not. We've tried to reach him. You need to help us get in touch with him, if nothing else,
Well, we can certainly act as a go-between there.
Thank you.
Jaime is Mexico's probably preeminent authority on UFO technology and apparitions and sightings and research, as well as ancient archaeological research, particularly in my area. And he was incredibly valuable in Mexico City in 2009 in helping us gain access to Teotihuacan so we could carry out these measurements. So, of course, we called Jaime from the ship, which is not a simple thing, by the way, either logistically or economically these days. You would think that you could call anybody from anywhere on the planet with satellites. Not exactly true, and that's a whole other discussion. Anyway, so we eventually got hold of him, laid out, what I was trying to do as a culmination of 8-9 years of this research. I mean, without empirical research, Henrik, you got nothing. You may have a theory, you may have a nice idea, but unless you can measure it in science, it doesn't mean anything.
Sure.
The thing that's made our work so remarkable is that we put out a model for what should be going on. Then we actually went with, as I said, this digitized technology that I borrowed from my friend Dr. De Palma in the 1970s. And lo and behold, the predictions of the model are overwhelmingly confirmed. The background torsion field is measurable, it's palpable, it's scientifically sensible in the sense of being, able to be sensed. It's measurable, it's reproducible. It's all the amazing things that bringing science into this equation would mandate if it was real. And now I was being told on the eve of going and, making some preeminent measurements at the end of the Mayan calendar at the key Mayan site, Chichen Itza, I was being told under no circumstances are you going to be able to bring in any of this equipment. You can imagine how we felt.
Yeah, definitely. Let me give me your hunch here. How do you think that they found out? Did they not want you to do this? What do you think?
Well, we can speculate, till, as I used to say over here, the cows come home. But the bottom line is, even the people from the ship who booked these excursions, these shore excursions, as they're called, they tried to help, in addition to our own organizers of the so-called Grand Galactic Mayan Cruise of 2012, and the head of the shore expedition office came to me on the ship late on the evening of the 18th. She was actually crying. I mean, I was astonished to see someone who understood what was at stake, and she could do nothing with the authorities. Excuse me, they were absolutely implacable. They would not let me bring in the equipment that I had presumed had been okayed before. So anyway, we're still on the night before. We're on the ship. We're headed at 20-plus knots toward, Progreso, which is where you have to land and dock to disembark for a 2-hour bus ride inland to Chichen Itza. And we called Jaime Maussan. Well, Jaime's recommendation after we went through the whole thing was, there's nothing I can do. It's too late. We've had a new change of presidential administration in the last 20 days. This is Jaime's, discussion with us. And the new government in Mexico is very strict and has changed all the rules, and I frankly don't quite understand what they're doing. This was what he was telling us. So his recommendation was, you have to play ordinary tourist, you have to ditch the group, you have to go in by yourselves, just you and Robin, play tourist, put the equipment in an old bag, wear touristy type stuff that won't catch attention, and basically try to slip in under the radar and get the measurements.
Right.
So this is what we did on the bus, which is a 2-hour bus ride from the ship to Chichen Itza. I used the PA system. We had an entire bus. We had something like 50 people who had signed up to help me carry out these measurements. It was quite extraordinary because we had a Mayan elder with the group named Han Lutzman, you may have heard of, and he only had 100. So science had 50% on spiritualism, which the organizers of the tour were kind of amazed about. The people actually were interested in what we were trying to do, which I think is very affirming and very gratifying, because we're putting science on these bones of mythology and, New Age woo-woo and all that. We're actually able to measure what the Mayans were intimately familiar with and left us in the form of a legacy of these extraordinary structures and what they do to the background field, the torsion field of this entire planet. Again, per the actual measurements we've been able to carry out. So now we're on the bus, we're headed toward Chichen Itza, and I'm telling my 50 people, well, there's been a slight change of plan. And so we described to them what had happened and politically the situation we faced when we got there, and how they had to be our diversion. They had to lead authorities in another direction so that Robin and I could basically, sneak in, although you can't really sneak in. You have to go through the turnstiles and, pay with your tickets and all that.
Right.
But by not being with a group and not being with the group they were expecting, I was hoping we would get an opportunity to carry out these extremely important measurements literally on the eve of the alignment, which everybody's been talking about for the last 10 or 20 years. Fast forward the film. We get to Chichen Itza after several stops, which is good because I was able to do background measurements and actually able to record and confirm that the field around Chichen Itza extends far beyond the actual government-defined limits of the perimeter of the fence. It is a regional thing. Whatever that pyramid or collection of pyramids and other structures are doing in the force, to use a Star Wars term, is measurable miles away from Chichen Itza itself. Now, I learned this when we were doing measurements in England a couple years ago, because I had wanted to measure one particularly famous structure. And because of some reason, I think we had to get batteries or something, I stopped a half a mile away at a little store in the middle of nowhere in England to pick up some spare batteries. And I began measuring on a picnic table out in front of this little store, and half a mile away from the monument, the needle went off scale. So I had realized from a couple of years ago that the way to measure these places is to sneak up on them. You do measurements far away, and you increase the frequency as you get closer, because the effects are not confined just to the place that all the tourists are going. They cover a very large area, and they're interacting with the fields of other sacred sites that may not even be known. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that's still buried, right?
Sure, yeah.
And that is torsion active. So what I was hoping to do is to create kind of like an area map, and lo and behold, sitting in a couple of parking lots, because what they do on these buses is they take you to all the concessionaires who are selling tourist stuff before you get to the Grand Complex. Mm-hmm. So everybody has their hand in. I mean, it's really interesting to watch culturally how this is parceled out between the tour guides and the ship and the tour company and the people who run Chichen Itza. I mean, I couldn't believe the commercialization at Chichen Itza, where they have table after table after table set up all over this complex of Indians and Mexicans and Spaniards and whoever just selling stuff. I mean, it really, for me, it kind of took away from the sacredness of what the Maya obviously were trying to do, and it brought it into the late 20th, early 21st century commercialism, where anything is open season to make a buck, or in this case, a Mexican equivalent dollar. Anyway, so we get to the complex finally, and I've gotten some very interesting readings leading up to actually getting there. And we put all our stuff in a canvas bag and cover it with water, water bottles and tourist pamphlets, and we're wearing hats and short-sleeved Hawaiian shirts and looking as ugly American touristy as possible. And we get to the turnstiles, and the guide who takes your ticket looks down and he says, "Laptop?" And I think, oh God, here we are. And I mean, what can I do? Can I say, no, it's not a laptop? It's a water bottle. It looks like a laptop. No, I said, yeah, laptop. He says, okay, and waved us through. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, and Robin's thinking, we made it. Somehow we got in. Jaime's advice was great. We got it under the radar. So I make a beeline, which is like 1,400 feet away, down this path covered with, vines and palms and lined on both sides by vendors hawking everything imaginable. I mean, it was incredibly vibrant because all the bright colors, reds and blues and yellows and greens, and tables with all kinds of carved wares and stoneware and wooden idols and wooden, effigies and all this. Mm-hmm. Before you even get near the pyramid, you got to go through, an eighth of a mile of this stuff. So we're walking briskly with our canvas bag, with the instrumentation toward the pyramid, get out of this cope of trees and the path and the vendors, and get a chance to look across this open plaza to see the pyramid, and it's astonishing. That first impression is really incredibly impressive. And so everybody has to go and do this, because what happened to me will not happen to you unless you take in forbidden instrumentation. So I make a beeline for the far side of the pyramid, which is the northeastern side, which is one of the two sides where you have the stairway that is architecturally created in such a way that at the equinoxes you see a snake-like shadow form shimmering up and down the stairways, depending upon whether you're looking at dawn or sunset.
Right. Yeah.
It's known all over the world. This pyramid is known for that. I figured that was the side that was active, if the masonry was designed to follow the seasonal alignments, because again, we know the physics is based now on celestial alignments, and the solstice and the equinox are two celestial alignments, right, with the sun.
Mm-hmm.
So I get to the base of the stairway on that side, and it's just after 11:30 in the morning. It's still not even noon. We have to leave by 1 o'clock to drive 2 hours back to get the ship. You know, this is not an easy expedition, and I now know next time we don't do it this way, because you're constrained by schedules of technology and transportation that don't really allow, good science. But, it's the first time for everything. So there we are. I'm at the base of the stairway of the Kukulkan Pyramid. I'm pulling out the gear. I'm setting it up, and I find I can't see a thing. The sunlight is so bright and dazzling, because you're, 20 degrees north, and it's in winter, so the sun is south, and it basically, it's like high noon.
Mm-hmm.
And the ground is very bright, and there's no grass. There's lots of tourists, a lot of them dressed in white because they're going to be part of Hanbud's ceremony. But I find that I cannot see the laptop screen, which has been darkened, because the only way you can function when you do these measurements is on batteries.
So you have to dim it down and to save the
exactly.
battery.
You have to try to save power so that you get measurements for as long as possible.
Ah.
And I had 2 sets of batteries, so I could go like 10 hours. But when you switch in the middle, if something interesting is going on and you switch, you obviously are going to lose that data.
Yeah.
So I was trying to do everything to save power. Well, I found that dimming the screen to the degree that I had before we got there meant that I couldn't see anything. So I look around quickly, and I noticed that over between a place called the Platform of Venus, which is to the northeast, and another area which is a absolutely onslaught of man-made artificial tree trunks, which is a temple whose name escapes me at the moment, which is more to the southeast. There is a cope of trees, lots of trees, with benches under them and shade.
Is this called the Temple of 1,000 Warriors? Is that what you're talking
Yes,
about?
I think you're absolutely right.
Yep.
Yeah, that's to the south of the Platform of Venus.
Right, yeah.
So I make a beeline between these two other structures, because we're only going to be a few feet away, maybe 300 feet, 200 feet, less than a football field away from the pyramid. And again, what I found at Teotihuacan and found at Tikal and found on the way to Chichen Itza is that the influence, the torsion field influence of these structures is so vast and so amazing that you don't have to be right on them. One of the things that had changed since people had actually visited this pyramid in 2007, when you used to be able to run up and down the stairs, and I had hoped that we'd actually be able to conduct measurements on the pyramid like I had done at some of the other places in Central America. No, they've closed it off now, so you can't walk up and down the stairs. You have to be in the vicinity, but the good news is that's as good as being on the pyramid, because these things have huge influence over a very large volume / area. So there I am with Robin, behind me, and Ted St. Rain, who was taking video of all of this to document, what we're doing, by ourselves, playing tourist, taking a laptop and the Accutron and the quartz crystal reference and the other instrumentation that is required to do these measurements scientifically, and I'm heading towards some trees which are to the east of the pyramid in an effort to, actually northeast, in an effort to get out of the sun so I can see the screen and complete the setup.
Right.
So I get there, sit down, take out the equipment again, which I haven't actually put away. It's been all carried on the laptop. Make the final adjustments, start doing measurements, and suddenly, over my left shoulder, I hear in half English and half Spanish a voice say, "You can't do that." What? I look up, and there's a federale with cap and uniform and walkie-talkie, sternly looking at me, looking at the pyramid, and making me feel that I had just somehow committed a major felony in the state of the Yucatan in Mexico.
Right.
So Robin and I engage him in conversation. Ted St. Rain is filming, and we're going back and forth, and he's telling me that he's been on the walkie-talkie to the administration building, which is, he points back across the pyramid, just the way we came. And I have to get up and I have to leave and I have to take my equipment and I have to go and meet with the head administrator. So I say, of course, delaying, "Oh, why can't he come here?" "Oh, no, you have to go, So this goes back and forth for agonizingly long minutes as I'm trying to stretch all this out to get some kind of readings. Because I know that if we get readings, I will have a baseline from which to measure the other materials that we gathered on the way in, those, couple, 3 stops on the way in, and then to compare to the other measurements we had done at Teotihuacan and Tikal and the other Mayan sites that we've been able to measure.
Yeah, and
So
Richard as well, was this then time sensitive? Did you try to make the 11 a.m. Time as well here?
Actually, well, because we're on standard time, we're off daylight. We got there, I was able to start measuring exactly at noon.
Okay, yeah.
So, and that's what we found. Some interesting things happened at Teotihuacan. So I was able to make, because these things are not to the second, they're windows. It's like plus or minus 5 minutes or 10 minutes or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we're recording beginning at noon. And we've got until like at about 1 o'clock. I got an hour of measurements if nobody interferes with me. And this guy, official, is obviously interfering. Well, I'm thinking, okay, the longer I can constrain him and draw this out. So we, do every dumb tourist thing you can think of, do you speak English? Oh, I don't understand that. Oh, we've got the people at the turnstiles, they waved us through. What's the big deal about a laptop? Because it was the laptop that obviously they were looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people all over with cell phones. And they're using them and trying to find bars, and what purists usually do these days, which is to go to a sacred place and then try to call home and say, "Hey, Ma, you'll never guess where I'm standing," that kind of thing.
Right.
But it was a laptop which apparently rang this guy's alarm bells. Mm. So I'm delaying, and finally he's getting uppier and uppier, and he's making calls on the walkie-talkie, and I'm envisioning while all this is going on. Excuse me. I'm envisioning that I actually will be physically incarcerated and placed in confinement if I don't follow this guy's injunction eventually. Mm. Because there had been a Marine, remember the story of the Marine, the U.S. Marine, who had gone to Mexico just a few days before this, and who had been arrested and put in a Mexican jail for bringing in a shotgun to go hunting that was, I guess, a half-inch shorter than the permissible legal limit in Mexico.
Okay.
And this is after he had checked with the embassy and he filled out the paperwork, and as soon as he brought in the shotgun, bingo, they arrest him.
Jeez. Okay.
And at the time we were there, he was still incarcerated, and of course you all heard the stories about Mexican prisons.
Right.
You don't really want to spend your end of the Mayan calendar in a Mexican prison. Well, this is all, going past my mind's eye as I'm trying to delay bureaucratically this guy from physically arresting. Now, when we got back to shore, and I told the story in part on Coast the other night, someone kindly sent me a clipping, email attachment from Thomas's law books, which is a series of law books that are used even by the Supreme Court in terms of precedent. And they have, I forget what page it's on, but they have an actual definition of arrest. And let me pull it up here on the computer and read to you what it says, because it's very very eye-opening when it comes to this is from, American Jurisprudence, 2nd edition, volume 5, printed in 2007, by Wes Thompson. He's the author. And it says arrest, page 695. An arrest is the exercise of the power of the state to deprive a person of his or her liberty. An arrest is the most intrusive police-citizen encounter. What constitutes an arrest? Generally, an arrest is the quintessential seizure of a person. An arrest is the taking, seizing, or detaining of the person by another. 1, by touching or putting hands on the arrestee. 2, by an act that indicates the intention to take the arrestee into custody and that subjects the arrestee to the actual control and will of the person making the arrest. In other words, this guy is telling me that unless I do what he says, he's going to take further action. That is an arrest. So there are people who will say, well, you weren't thrown in jail. They didn't throw away the key. You weren't. No, the technical definition of arrest is what you undergo when someone curtails your liberty and makes you do what they want as opposed to what you want.
Yep.
So we got to, this is all on video. You can actually see him getting hotter and hotter and more adamant and making several calls on the walkie-talkie. Finally, he dramatically points toward the administration building with its thin radio antennas sticking up, and looking at me and looking at the laptop, and he says, you have to go to the administration building now. So I realized the game is up. We've been able to dally around for like 10, 12 minutes, something like that. So I start off with Robin behind me carrying the bag with the water bottles, which are heavy, poor gal, and I'm carrying the laptop, and I've got the Accutron in my pocket, and I've got the quartz crystal reference in one hand, and I've got wires trailing me, and I'm moving as slowly as possible. So as I cut back across this plaza with the pyramid sitting in the middle, we'll cut right past the northeast corner, and I'll get a baseline from the trees, cross toward the pyramid, and then out toward the administration building, and this will all show up in the recordings. And my plan is, when we get to the corner of the pyramid, I'm saying to Robin and Ted, is he behind us? Is he still looking? Is he watching? And they're saying, no, he's working with some other tourists. Apparently they had, the wrong kind of water bottle or something. I'm figuring we'll get to the pyramid, I'll make a left-hand turn, and I'll be out of line of sight of this guy, right? And I'll be able to continue the measurements. I'll walk around on the other side, and I'll find another group of trees to hide in, and I'll try to maybe put the laptop under the bag or something, and we'll just wait out this time till we get back to the ship, out of sight, because how are they going to find two people in the midst of thousands there that day?
Yeah.
Tourists and members of groups, and we had our two groups, and my guys doing their diversion tactic, which basically amounted to standing on sides of the pyramid and clapping and listening for the echoes. That's one of the things that you do when you're at Chichen Itza.
Okay.
And it turns out there are 7 echoes. Now that's important because in the physics, the tetrahedral symmetry underlying the physics itself is a 7 symmetry spin. So the fact that the Maya built their complex so you can get 7 echoes is kind of interesting.
Okay.
It's not the only piece of evidence or clue they left us that they knew what we know, but it's certainly some of the most dramatic, and our group was determinedly doing their echoey thing to keep the attention of the authorities on them to give us time to do the measurements, not knowing I had been arrested. So we're heading toward the corner of the pyramid, and I'm saying to Robin, is he looking? Is he looking? Is he behind us? He didn't follow us. He just stayed there under the trees, and as I said, turned his attention to some other poor sucker that he had to badger. We get to the corner of the pyramid. I'm about to make the left-hand turn, and there's another guard.
Bummer.
With a walkie-talkie.
Mm.
And she looks kind of nice. She's short, but she's nice. She had been designated to pick us up and personally convey us to the administration center. If you doubt, I was arrested under the definition of American jurisprudence. This should leave no doubt in anyone's mind. I was not going to be able to make my little, do-si-do left-hand turn and disappear in the crowd.
Yep.
So we're walking slowly. We're walking, remember the museum thing? We're walking, and I'm trying to get measurements, and we walk all the way, escorted by this young lady with her walkie-talkie on the air to the administration. I mean, you'd think I had committed some staggeringly abominable federal Mexican crime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All I'm doing is carrying an open laptop. What's the big deal?
Yeah, what's the big deal? Exactly.
So we walked back down this esplanade of vendors under the curving trees with their trinkets and their idols and their wood carvings and desperately trying to make a buck off the tourists. I mean, you really have to feel for the economy of Mexico that they have to profane a sacred site this way. It really was kind of tragic to see. So we get to the turnstiles, go back through them, and now I'm standing under a porte cochere with pillars, and you can see all this on the satellite imagery, which I'm putting together as part of the presentation of what the data actually showed us.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm standing there in front of the administration building, and my second guard says, "Stand here, wait." And there's a sign on the administration building saying, "Closed." Oh, great. So I'm supposed to go into this closed office and meet with this guy at their discretion. But guess what? The computer and the Accutron are still recording.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's shaded under this overhang, I'm able to see on the screen we're getting really interesting data. So we do another, draw the timeout. So I stand out there obediently. I find that there's a one of those plastic garbage cans that has the kind of top on it where you put things in through the side. So I'm able to put the laptop and the Accutron down on this garbage can, standing out in front of this brilliant orange pillar, one of a dozen or so, in front of the administration offices in the shade next to an open courtyard. I'm 1,400 feet from the pyramid, and I'm still getting really interesting readings. So, Robin and our Mayan guides who were with us on the bus, they eventually get tired of standing there because nobody came out. Nothing happened.
Mm-hmm.
This gal disappears into this building and never emerges, never comes out, never comes back. So I'm standing there, and obviously the game is they think if they get Hoagland away from Pyramid, Hoagland's measurements come to an end. They'll just keep him cooling his heels out in front of this administration building until the bus has to leave. Problem solved, right? Technically, I'm still under arrest. Technically, I have been told, stand here and wait. Another official, another authority will be coming to interview you, to talk to you. Nothing ever happens. So Robin, who knows Spanish, goes in and tries to talk to this guy. He doesn't want to come out and talk to me. He doesn't, this is curious, he doesn't want me to come in and talk to him.
Okay.
He wants me to be standing out there, in essence, in their view, doing nothing.
Okay.
Cooling my heels until the bus has to leave. Not knowing, because obviously the underlings don't know, anything about how the physics of this extraordinary place is really working. That I'm getting really interesting data. And we didn't know how interesting until we got back to the ship and started, looking at it that night and the next morning, and realized that we'd gotten a real treasure trove right under these guys' noses, despite their best efforts to stop it. I mean, if they had taken my equipment, that would have been one thing, but they basically thought if they got me away from the pyramid, they would have done their duty. Now remember, this is going on with the clock ticking because the bus is going to leave in about an hour, actually less than an hour now, about 45 minutes, and that will be the end of what I can do on the campus of Chichen Itza. So Robin is talking to this guy, and my Mayan guide is talking to him, and they come out several times, and I'm making the usual, well, we didn't know that there were fees for permits, et cetera, playing real dumb tourist, right? Whatever we have to pay, of course we'll pay. I'm thinking, what they'll do is they'll give me an extraordinary amount. Some of it will go into somebody's pocket, right?
Yep.
And that's the way the system works. Oh, no. This is not your normal touristy situation. They do not want me with that laptop anywhere near, in their mind, the pyramid from which I will gather data that for some reason they don't want the world to know about. But they don't know the limits or extent of what this thing is doing, so they think if they get me away from it, standing there cooling my heels, nothing can happen, right?
Who's giving the instruction, do you think, to keep you away?
Well, I think it's because we made a big deal the night before, ship to shore, with the authorities. The ship did, Carnival Cruise Lines did, because they get a piece of the action of the override on the tourist, right?
Mm-hmm.
We think they may have mentioned Jaime's name. And the fact that he was involved kicked this up to a federal level. And I think they definitely had somebody on the lookout for a guy with a laptop.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, again, you've got thousands of people. It's the night before, the afternoon before, the end of the Mayan calendar, the 13th Baktun. You've got people with cell phones and iPads and iPhones and every conceivable form of electronics, including a zillion cameras, right? The only guy they arrest is the guy with the laptop. Now that has to tell you something. In fact, I found out some more data, because we had been told that this huge crackdown on what you could bring in was all because they were concerned on the eve of the end of the calendar. Here's the term that's floated all over the world. They were concerned with terrorists.
Okay.
Terrorism. Yeah, I'm a older guy with a
You got a bomb in your laptop.
straw
Right.
hat.
Got it.
Going to bomb the Chichen Itza complex with a laptop. So I'm standing there, and Robin makes a great, pretense, of getting mad at me in public, and, you can stand there, I'm going to go. And so she leaves me to stand there with the system still working. And she takes Ted, and she takes our Mayan guide and disappears back down the 1,400-foot path toward the pyramid and toward the complex. So, she obviously can see something, as well as give me time to stand there and continue to take measurements, which no one seems to notice. And I'm standing there and I'm looking at the tourists, going past me, and their lines passing, in front of me, going through the turnstiles to get into the, campus so they can go and see the wonders and the sights and all the vendors. And I'm watching the office, which is, 15 feet away across this little passageway underneath, protected from the sun, the concrete, overhang. And there's nothing going on in this administrative office. Some people go in, some people go out. They look like they're official. I see one guy, with a silver hair and a silver mustache who looks kind of like he would be an administrator. And I try to catch his eye and see if he's looking for me. Nothing. He's, he talks with a beautiful young guide. They kind of walk off together toward the parking lot, and you can finish the rest of that story in your mind. Anyway, so there I am, all by my splendid lonesome, taking measurements, ostensibly outside Chichen Itza, but close enough that we're getting all kinds of readings being totally ignored, but kind of under house arrest. So after about 15, 20 minutes of this, I look around, and I realize that if I move my equipment a few feet, like 15 feet in the other direction, out into this open, sunny courtyard, which has concrete spars across the top, so there's kind of like a lattice-like effect in the shadows on the floor of this patio. I can put the Accutron next to a wall of the structure to see if it will have any change in terms of the amplifying of the background field, which is one of the things I learned in doing this before at other places.
Right, because at this point you don't know whether you will get different results moving around the complex.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You got it right on the head. So I figured that technically I'm still kind of standing in front of the administration building where I was told to stand. But if they come out and say, "What are you doing?" I'll say, "Well, I wanted to move here because the sun, was coming around and I was getting too hot," something like that. So I moved over there by the wall, near a staircase, set up the equipment, and start taking readings in a new location about 15 feet from where I'd been standing with the equipment sitting on the top of this garbage can. And then I look around and I realize that in the center of this little plaza, which is maybe 30 feet across, 40 feet, something like that, there's a coffee bar, an open coffee bar, and I can get something cold to drink because it's getting very warm. So I leave the equipment, I leave the laptop and the equipment by the wall and this staircase that led up to a second story, all in brilliant white stone. You have to imagine it's sun-drenched, it's very bright, it's sunny, it's noon, Mexico in the Yucatan. Gorgeous day, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Fluffy clouds, blue sky, white clouds, tons of tourists, everybody enjoying being at Chichen Itza except me. So I go over to the coffee bar, leave the laptop and the equipment doing its measuring a few feet away, keep my eye on it, go over, get something nice and cold, go back, and I'm looking. And finally, it gets to be about 1 o'clock, and we've been told that 1 o'clock we had to go back to the parking lot, which is another couple hundred feet further from the pyramid, to get back to the buses so we could get on board and get home to the ship in time so they wouldn't sail without us. You're kind of constrained when you do these things as part of a group.
Sure, yeah.
So I pick up my equipment, and I continue doing measurements all the way out into the parking lot. I rendezvous with Ted and with Robin and the other members of our group, and I'm sitting there while we're waiting for everybody to kind of dribble back and then board the buses, and I'm trying to take more measurements. We get on the bus. We're about to leave. I look down, and I realize, oh, my gosh, I've left the bag. Remember the canvas bag with the water bottles and the pamphlets and all the touristy stuff?
Yeah.
When I moved the equipment from the garbage can over by the wall in front of the administration building, I left the canvas bag with not only water bottles and stuff, but my passport sitting by that garbage can in front of the administration building.
Well, that's no good.
Not at all. So Robin, of course, eek, and she and Ted says, "Well, I'll help run and find it. It's still there." So they literally run down the corridor. Fortunately, you don't have to get into the complex because it's on the other side of the turnstiles. It's before you get into Chichen Itza itself. They run down, and lo and behold, the bag is still there. And they pick it up, and they run back to the bus, and I've got my passport and all that. And then I began to realize something very weird. Because I remembered seeing while I'm standing there in this courtyard now, farther away from the administration building, by the laptop as it's doing its measurements by the wall, I remember seeing a couple of janitors. You know how janitors on a tourist complex? They're the ones wearing the orange vests. Mm-hmm. And they have brooms. And they have things with wheels. They've been picking up trash all over the area they've been assigned, and they wound up dumping it into this trash can, the one that I had the equipment sitting on minutes before. Yeah. Well, while they're doing that, unbeknownst to me in my memory, the green canvas bag with the water bottles and the tourist pamphlets and my passport is sitting right in front of them at the base of the trash can they're emptying their trash into. And they don't do a thing. Now, you've been in the United States long enough, Henrik, to know that you cannot leave a bag unattended in a major airport without calling down, the Hades of hell.
Sure, yeah.
That every possible security guy is going to run, guns drawn, to the site of an abandoned bag because obviously it's from some terrorist, some bomber
Sure.
who has left it ticking and has escaped from the scene, and it's going to blow up and kill an awful lot of people. If there was a real security lockdown on Chichen Itza that afternoon, how come the janitors, who are the people wandering around cleaning up and looking for junk, for debris, for trash, how come they had not been briefed, oh, and if you find an abandoned canvas bag, sound the alarm, because obviously this is a terrorist.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And at the very least, taking the bag, it's sitting right in front of the administration building, for God's sake. If I had been a terrorist, could you think of a cleverer way to cause mayhem and destruction?
Probably not.
And yet they left it there for another 45 minutes. So Robin and Ted could go back and pick it up and return to the parking lot and the buses, and we started back to the ship.
Sure, yeah.
So obviously the whole story, the whole, fake innuendo about terrorism and terrorists and you can't bring anything in was all a shaggy dog story.
Oh, of course. It always is. We know that.
Well, but it's nice to have confirmation. And in this case, it's absolute confirmation. They had not briefed any of their personnel to be on the lookout for terrible people doing terrible things.
Sure.
They were on the lookout for a guy with a laptop conducting illicit measurements on something they don't want known.
Yeah. Wow. Richard, we're going to take a break here in a minute or so. We're going to, of course, carry on talking more in the second segment. I want to let you continue your story and obviously, just carry on and see where this is going. Of course, I want to ask you more about the, what it is you measure and how that works, the accutron, the torsion measuring instrument and all that. But is there anywhere, you said you recorded videos and stuff for this, so is this going to be up on the web somewhere later on your website or something like that, so people can find out?
I'm not sure, but I think Ted has actually posted this section, Hoagland Gets Arrested, on YouTube somewhere.
Oh, okay, I got to see that.
Oh, you've got to see this, because it's a real-time, slow-motion depiction of a process that's totally bureaucratic, totally unthinking, totally on automatic pilot, and nobody really cared about the thing everybody said they cared about, which was keeping terrorists from doing terrible things to all the tourists at Chichen Itza.
Sure, yeah.
That was an inadvertent part of the experiment. The fact that I did not remember, because the bag was sitting on the other side of this pillar and this trash can from my new position by the wall doing the measurements. I had forgotten, because I'm trying to make sure that I get the instrumentation with me and no one walks off with it, I had literally forgotten that I had a canvas bag that I'd been carrying this stuff in, because once you get to a site, as you'll see when you see the sci-fi special, the New Secrets of 2012, which was taped in 2009 and aired on Sci-Fi dozens and dozens of times, I am carrying this open equipment, and it's kind of delicate, and it has to be balanced properly, and I obviously don't want to drop it, and I don't want to, step off a pyramid in the wrong direction and wind up sailing through hundreds of feet of empty space. So I was really focused on the equipment and totally, forgot the bag. That bag was there consistently from the time that I was told to stand in that particular place till the time Robin and Ted came back from the bus to get it. Nobody gave a damn of an abandoned bag sitting right in front of the administration building, within feet. If I had had C4 or something in that bag, it would have totally destroyed the central administrative complex of Chichen Itza, taken out hundreds of tourists standing in line waiting to get in. It would have been the perfect place to carry out a terrorism act, and nobody gave a damn.
Yep.
Which is absolute proof that this whole war on terrorism, at least in terms of that particular set of pronouncements and edicts, was a total fake.
Sure, yeah.
They did not want anyone coming in with equipment, scientific equipment, to measure what was going on at Chichen Itza. Now, have you been, I sent you some links to look at before we agreed to do this.
Yes.
Did you happen to see the double picture I sent of Chichen Itza on a tourist photograph taken in the summer of 2009?
Oh, definitely. We had that one up on the website ourselves.
Ah,
extraordinary.
So you've got the before and after where the tourist with his iPhone takes a picture on an afternoon during a thunderstorm from the ball court looking across the wall toward the Kukulkan Pyramid.
Yeah.
And it's sitting there in all its splendor under a glowering thunderhead, which is looming up over it, kind of a darkened, storm-racked sky, very dramatic, but it's just a pyramid. In the next shot, he's got his two little daughters in the shot in front of the wall in the ball court with the Kukulkan Pyramid beyond, and everything is the same except there is this incredible parallel vertical pink beam. Yes, a pink beam shooting skyward from the center of the pyramid up into those clouds that is mind-boggling. Now, you'd look at that, which I did originally when I got it a couple, 3 years ago, and you say, that's got to be a hoax, it's fake. Somebody in Photoshop.
Mm.
Not. For one thing, I got the original images from Jaime back when we were doing our torsion work in 2009. This had come into him from some tourist who visited Mexico and had taken this shot, and he got a copy. Later, Linda Moulton Howe, I presume you've had her on your show.
Sure, yep.
Okay, Linda did an incredible due diligence, everything a sterling reporter should do. She actually tracked down the tourist and the family that took the pictures. And she had a whole report on earthfiles.com describing where they came from. I think they came from Honduras, where they'd stayed, the buses they were on, the group they were with, how the pictures came to be. It turns out that he just took them on an iPhone when he was trying to photograph his daughters, and when they got back on the bus and he looked at the pictures, how tourists will share pictures?
Sure, yeah.
Everybody was looking at these pictures he had just shot moments before in the ball court. So there was no way. I mean, you really have to be incredibly cynical and skeptical to think that this average Honduran tourist with his two little girls had cleverly figured out a way to hoax an iPhone image taken in front of the pyramids in July of 2009 showing a beam shooting up into space from the pyramid. Occam's razor says no, the photographs are real, the family is real, the tourists are real, the people on the bus who saw the image in real time were real, and this really happened.
Yeah, as far as I know, Richard, no one has actually been able to prove that it's a fake. As you said, Jamie Moussan has done a pretty good analysis of the picture and looked at it in different ways and stuff like that. So it seems to be the real deal as far as I know.
It's the real
anyway.
deal, and what's really cool is when I got back and had peace and quiet to analyze our data post-Chichen Itza, I was able to turn the clock back in the celestial simulation programs we use, like Redshift and Celestial and all that. I now know in the physics why that beam was triggered at that particular time on that afternoon of July 24th, 2009.
Interesting, okay.
It has to do with celestial alignments, and that's part of the presentation of data I'm preparing when we can present this, because, kind of fast forward the film, I was supposed to come back from the cruise, and then this month, last weekend in February, I was to present our first cut of data at the Conscious Life Expo in Los Angeles, which is organized by the same folks who organized the Mayan Galactic Cruise, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it didn't happen because they suddenly uninvited me.
Okay.
They did not want me to present what I found. Now, I'm not sure exactly what happened. I do know that Ted St. Rain, remember our videographer, who in fact was the videographer for the entire Mayan Galactic Cruise, he told me afterwards that the last night on the ship, when we were doing kind of a plenary session, everybody was kind of talking with everybody else as to what they had learned and what they found and what the experience meant to them, and I laid out some preliminary data that we'd recorded at Chichen Itza. Ted and several other people said that there were 2 Mexican federales wearing federale caps up in the back of the auditorium with video camera filming everything I presented. Now that means that the Mexican government paid Carnival Cruise Lines for 2 tickets for 2 people to get on that ship at Progreso, or maybe Cozumel, which was our last stop in Mexico before we came back to the States. And they paid them to basically go on the ship and film me presenting the data we had recorded.
Wow, that's really interesting. No, Richard, before we carry on here, let's take a short break. I want to continue and let you fold out the story, if you will, and all the intricacies thereof. In the meantime, of course, just quickly before we take a break, we want to relay people to enterprisemission.com. That's the website where you can read more about all this stuff, and you can take a look at the photos that Richard talked about this beam coming out and everything. We'll link that up, and of course, we're going to look around and see if we can find that YouTube video as well, so you can take a look at the experience yourself. But anything else, by the way, Richard, we should give out website-wise or something like that before we take a short break here?
Well, don't forget our 2 Facebook pages. I have a fans and friends page. There are close to 50,000 fans and friends, and I want to thank all of them for their support. And if you want to join our merry band, there will be more adventures, because we're going to be doing more of this, hopefully avoiding arrest. So, and when we come back, I'll tell you, as Paul Harvey used to say, the rest of the story.
That sounds very good. Stay with us, Richard. And again, all the links will be up on redicecreations.com. We'll be right back with more after this.